I remember the sound of the rain that morning. It wasn't loud. No thunder, no lightning. Just a quiet drizzle, tapping on the old window pane beside my armchair. It's strange, isn't it? How even after all these years, the rain still sounds the same, as if time forgot to change that one thing. Even when it changed everything else. That's when I saw him, standing at the gate of my old English house, the one I swore he'd never walk through again. My hands trembled around the teacup, not because I feared him, but because my heart, foolish as ever, still remembered the shape of his shadow. He was older, much older. The diamonds he once traded my love for had lost their shine, and so had he. The wind carried the faint creak of the gate as he hesitated, as though unsure if he deserved to walk that path again. I could have called out to him, could have opened the door, but instead I watched. Through the same lace curtain where 40 years ago I watched him leave. And so, my dear, before I tell you what happened when he came back, I must tell you how it all began. Because love, real love, doesn't die in a single moment of betrayal. It dies slowly, one unanswered letter at a time. I was 19 when Edward first walked into my life. A warm summer evening, the village fair, and the scent of wild roses lingering in the air. He was dressed too finely for our small town. A silk waistcoat, polished shoes, and a smile that could disarm even the most careful soul. I should have known then that a man who shines too brightly is only passing through. He bought me a glass locket from a little stall, said it matched the light in my eyes. I laughed, nervous, flattered, enchanted. It wasn't the words, you see, but the way he looked at me when he said them, as if I was something rare, something worth holding. He wasn't from our village. He worked in London, in a firm that dealt with precious stones and foreign jewels. He told me stories of grand parties and velvet gowns, of men who wore power like perfume, and women who glittered in diamonds they didn't pay for themselves. And I, foolish little me, thought it sounded like a fairy tale. When he asked me to marry him a year later, I didn't hesitate. Mother wept tears of pride. Father warned me gently. Ruth, dear, some men love gold more than they love God. I laughed it off then. I thought he was only being protective. But his words, they would come back to haunt me one day. We married in the small chapel by the sea. I remember the smell of salt, the sound of waves crashing softly against the stones, and Edward's hand, steady, warm, reassuring. He whispered, "You'll never want for anything, my Ruth. I'll build us a life so beautiful, the stars themselves will envy you." And for a while, he did. He brought me silk dresses, a pearl comb, and a promise of forever. Our house, the one I still live in, was his gift to me. Old English stone, ivy climbing the walls, and a view that stretched all the way to the horizon. It was a dream I didn't deserve. Or so I thought, but dreams, my dear, are fragile things. And sometimes, the moment they begin to feel real is the moment they begin to crack. It started with late nights. He'd come home smelling of cigars and perfume that wasn't mine. I asked him once, softly, carefully, and he smiled that charming smile of his. "Business dinners, my love," he said. "Clients adore extravagance." But the dinners grew longer and the smiles shorter. And one night, I found a diamond bracelet tucked in his coat pocket. Not my size, not my style. When I asked about it, his eyes flickered with something cold. "Don't be childish, Ruth. You've become too suspicious for your own good." That night, I cried quietly into my pillow. Not because of the bracelet, but because I realized the man I married was slipping away. One glittering lie at a time. Months passed. I busied myself with tending the garden, baking bread, and pretending I was still the woman he once adored. But deep down, I knew. He had found someone else. Someone who could give him what I never could. Access, wealth, the illusion of grandeur. One evening, as the fire burned low, he came home with a gleam in his eyes I hadn't seen in months. He poured himself a drink, sat across from me, and said, "Ruth, I've been offered a partnership in London. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." I smiled faintly, though my chest ached. "That's wonderful, Edward." He hesitated, then added, "It'll mean spending more time away. But it's for us, Ruth. For our future." He kissed my forehead and left the next morning with 2 suitcases and a promise to return before winter. Winter came and went, so did spring, but Edward did not. Letters arrived at first, beautiful, crafted, charming letters, filled with stories of his success, his travels, his longing for me. I waited for each one like a child, waiting for Christmas morning, until one day, they stopped coming. Weeks turned into months, and then, one crisp autumn evening, a neighbor came to me, eyes wide, voice trembling. "Ruth," she said, "I saw him in London with another woman. She was wearing diamonds, and they called her Mrs. Langford." I felt the ground shift beneath me, not from surprise, but from the confirmation of what I'd known all along. He had traded my love for diamonds. That night, I burned every letter he ever sent me. The ashes floated like black butterflies around the hearth as I whispered to the flames, "You can keep his words. I don't want them anymore." But pain, my dear, doesn't leave when you tell it to. It lingers. In the creak of the floorboards, the scent of his cologne that never quite fades, and the echo of footsteps you keep expecting but never hear again. Years passed. I rebuilt myself. Slowly, painfully, quietly. People pitied me. At first, they whispered, "Poor Ruth, abandoned for a richer woman." But I learned to live without him. I planted roses where bitterness grew. I filled the house with light, laughter, and music that wasn't his. I became the woman he once promised I would be, only without him. And yet, some nights, when the moonlight poured through the window just right, I could almost see him, standing at the edge of the garden, looking lost. I'd blink, and he'd be gone. Perhaps it was memory, or maybe some ghosts never truly leave the ones they broke. Then came that morning, the rain, the quiet, the trembling teacup, and there he was, standing at my gate after 40 long years. He looked smaller somehow. The man who once walked like he owned the sun now looked like he was begging the clouds for mercy. His hair was grey, his hands frail, and his eyes, oh, his eyes, they carried the weight of everything he'd done and everything he'd lost. He lifted his head, searching for me through the window. Our eyes met for the first time in decades, and I swear, for a brief second, I saw the young man I once loved, hiding behind the ruins of who he'd become. He mouthed something. I couldn't hear it, but I think he said my name. "Ruth!" My heart stuttered, not with love, but with the ache of remembering what once was. And as I sat there, watching him from behind the same curtain that once witnessed his departure, I realized something. Sometimes, life doesn't bring people back for closure. It brings them back so you can see, with your own eyes, that you survived without them. My dear, before I continue, if this story has touched your heart even a little, do subscribe and stay with me through the end, because what happened next, when I finally opened that door, changed everything I thought I knew about forgiveness. I don't remember standing up, One moment, I was watching him through the lace curtain. The next, I found myself walking toward the front door, the old wooden floor creaking beneath my slippers. Every step echoed like a memory, a heartbeat I had buried years ago, finding its rhythm again. The brass doorknob was cold. I hesitated, my fingers trembling against it, wondering if opening that door would invite all the ghosts I had so carefully locked away. But something in me, perhaps curiosity, perhaps mercy, turned the handle anyway. The hinges groaned softly, as though the house itself remembered him. And there he was, standing under the grey sky, rain clinging to his coat, eyes wide, with disbelief. For a long silent moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the rain between us, whispering of all the things time had stolen. Ruth, my name left his lips like a prayer, or maybe a confession. He stepped forward, then stopped, uncertain. His voice cracked. You look just the same. I smiled faintly. Then your eyes have grown kinder, Edward. Age does that, doesn't it? It softens even the cruelest memories. He lowered his gaze. I didn't know if you'd open the door. I shrugged gently. Neither did I. He laughed once, a dry, broken sound. You always were braver than me. I studied his face. The years had carved their story into his skin. Lines of regret, shadows of pride. The hollowness of a man who had everything and somehow lost it all. Why are you here, Edward? I asked softly. After all this time, he looked past me, into the hallway behind, where portraits of our youth still hung. Because everything I chased turned to dust, and the one thing I left behind, you, was the only thing that ever felt real. I said nothing. Silence can be crueler than anger sometimes. He shifted, uneasy under the weight of it. I was foolish, Ruth. Blinded by greed, by ambition. She promised me the world. And for a while, I thought I had it. But the world she gave me was hollow. Every diamond, every mansion, every glittering lie, they all lost their shine. I closed my eyes. And when the shine faded, you remembered me. He nodded slowly. Yes, I did. He asked if he could come in, and though part of me wanted to shut the door forever, I stepped aside. Not because I wanted him inside, but because I wanted to see, once and for all, the man he had become. He walked into the house as if entering a memory. His eyes scanned the room, the fireplace, the armchair, the faded rug where we once danced barefoot on a summer night. Everything looks the same, he whispered. Not everything, I replied. Some things learn to live without you. He turned, eyes glistening. Ruth, I came to ask for forgiveness. The words fell heavy, like stones dropped into water. Forgiveness? I repeated. For which part, Edward? The lies? The silence? Or the way you made me feel small in my own home? He swallowed hard. For all of it. I was young, stupid, greedy. I thought love could wait while I built an empire. But empires crumble, Ruth. Love doesn't. I wanted to believe him. God help me, I wanted to. But you can't rebuild 40 years with a few sorry words. No matter how sincere they sound. He reached into his coat and pulled out something wrapped in an old handkerchief. He placed it on the table between us, carefully, almost reverently, and unfolded it. Inside lay the glass locket he once gave me at the village fair, cracked, but still glinting faintly in the lamplight. I kept it, he said, voice trembling, through everything. I wanted to return it to you long ago, but I didn't have the courage. I stared at it, the same locket that once held my picture, the one I burned the night I learned he'd married another. Why now? I asked. Because she's gone, he whispered. The woman I left you for. She died last year, and in her last moments, she said something that broke me. Edward, you never loved me. You loved the way I sparkled. He looked up, eyes wet. She was right. I loved her diamonds, not her heart. The clock ticked softly in the silence that followed. I could feel the house breathing around us, the air thick with old sorrow, and something almost like pity. I sat down, slowly, and gestured for him to do the same. Tell me, I said quietly. What do you expect from me now? He shook his head. Nothing. I came because I couldn't die without seeing you again. Die? He hesitated. I'm sick, Ruth. The doctors say, not long now. My breath caught. For a moment, I saw not the man who broke me, but the boy who once promised to build me a world full of light. I thought if I saw you, he continued, if I told you how sorry I was, maybe I could leave this life a little lighter. I looked at him, truly looked at him, and for the first time in decades, I felt something shift inside me. Not love, not hate, just release. You know, I said softly. For years I dreamed of this moment. I thought I'd shout at you, curse your name, make you feel the pain you gave me. But now that you're here, I realize pain is its own punishment. You've carried yours far longer than I ever carried mine. He bowed his head, shoulders shaking. I don't deserve your kindness. Maybe not, I said gently. But forgiveness isn't something we give to others, Edward. It's something we give ourselves. To stop bleeding from wounds that no longer exist. He stayed for tea. We sat by the fire. Two old souls bound by memories that refused to fade. He spoke of his years in London, the parties, the wealth, the loneliness that followed. He confessed that after his wife's death, he tried to find me, but I'd moved, changed my name back to my father's, disappeared from his world entirely. I thought you'd hate me forever, he said quietly. I did, I admitted, for a very long time, but hate grows heavy, Edward. And I learned to set it down. As the firelight flickered, he took a slow breath. You always had more strength than I did. I smiled sadly. No, I just had more to lose. He looked around again. At the framed photos of my children, my grandchildren. You built a beautiful life, he said softly. Yes, I replied. Out of broken pieces. For a moment, he just stared into the flames. I never had children. Perhaps, I said, because you were too busy chasing glitter to hold something real. He nodded, tears glistening. You're right. When the clock struck midnight, he stood to leave. The rain had stopped. The night outside was still and silver, the moon hanging low over the sea. He turned at the door. Ruth, do you think people like me deserve forgiveness? I paused, looking at him, really looking. You already have it, I said softly. But that doesn't mean you get to have me. He smiled faintly, almost gratefully. That's fair. Then, with trembling fingers, he took my hand and pressed it to his lips. Thank you for everything, even the silence. And then he walked away, the same path he took all those years ago. Only this time, I didn't watch through tears. I watched with peace. That night, as I sat by the window, the rain began again. Soft, rhythmic, forgiving. I thought of how strange it is, the way life circles back, giving us the endings we thought we'd never get. He came to me empty-handed, but left lighter. And I was finally free. So, my dear, tell me, have you ever forgiven someone who broke your heart? Did it heal you, or did it haunt you? I'd love to hear your story too. I didn't sleep that night. The house was too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't rest. It lingers. It sits with you, watches you. Reminds you that some ghosts wear faces you once loved. The fire had died long ago, but the scent of burnt wood still drifted through the room. I sat in my old armchair, wrapped in the same shawl I'd worn since evening, staring at the teacup he'd left unfinished. His fingerprints still glistened faintly on the porcelain. Isn't it strange how even the smallest trace of someone can hold more power than 1,000 apologies? The clock struck 2, and with every tick, I could hear the echoes of a life that might have been. If he hadn't left, if I hadn't burned those letters, if love hadn't turned into something we both forgot how to keep alive. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the world washed and new, but inside, everything felt heavy. The kind of heaviness that only comes after finally saying goodbye. The second goodbye, the one that actually means something. I looked at the table again, at the handkerchief where the cracked locket still lay. It seemed smaller now, dimmer, like the memory it carried had finally lost its hold. I thought of how he'd said he was dying. I thought of how he'd looked at me, not as a man pleading for love, but as a soul begging for peace. And for the first time I realized he wasn't the only one seeking it. When dawn came, it came quietly, like it was afraid to disturb me. A thin ribbon of light slipped through the curtains, stretching across the rug where his footprints had dried. I followed them to the door, half expecting him to be standing there still. But the garden was empty, just dew and silence. Something glimmered near the doorstep, a small envelope, slightly damp from the rain. My name was written on it, in his old handwriting, Ruth. I stood there for a long while, the envelope trembling in my hands, afraid of what waited inside. Sometimes the truth feels heavier than lies, doesn't it? Because once you open it, once you know, you can never go back to not knowing. I took it inside, set it on the table beside the locket, and lit a candle. The flame flickered as though the air itself was holding its breath. And then I opened it. The paper was yellowed and soft, as if it had been written long ago. Long before last night. My dearest Ruth, if you're reading this, it means I found the courage I lacked all those years. There's something I've carried with me for decades, and I can't leave this world without telling you. You once asked me, years ago, why I left without looking back. I told you it was ambition, and that was true, but not the whole truth. When I went to London, I discovered something about us, about the child you never knew you were carrying. I found out through a letter your mother sent me, one you never saw. She said you'd lost the baby while I was away. She told me you blamed me for it, that you wanted nothing to do with me again. And I believed her. By the time I returned, you had moved, changed your number, and the house was empty. I thought I'd already destroyed enough of your life, so I stayed away. Only years later did I learn the truth. That you never received her letter either. That the child had lived for 3 short months before God took them from this world. And I wasn't there to hold you, to grieve with you, to be a man worthy of the love you gave me. I have carried that guilt ever since, and if there is one thing I ask of you now, it's this. Do not let that sorrow follow you into the light. We both lost something far greater than each other. We lost time. And there's no price high enough to buy it back. Yours, always. Even when I didn't deserve to be, Edward. The letter trembled in my hands as I finished reading. The words blurred through my tears. For years I'd believed he'd left me for another woman, for diamonds and power. And though that was true, it wasn't the whole story. My mother, she had written that letter, trying to protect me, perhaps. Or maybe trying to protect my pride. But in doing so, she had broken something sacred between us. And for decades, both Edward and I had lived as ghosts, in a story neither of us fully understood. I pressed the paper to my chest. The ache was sharp, sudden, familiar. The echo of a wound I thought had long healed. I whispered, "You fool. Both of us fools." Later that morning, I went to the attic. It's where I kept the old things. The memories too heavy for daily living. Boxes of letters, photographs, the wedding veil I never had the heart to throw away, and there, tucked in an old trunk beneath yellowed linens, I found a small box wrapped in silk. Inside was a tiny bracelet, the kind made for an infant's wrist, with the initials ER engraved. Edward Ruth, our child, the one who had lived quietly between our mistakes. I sat on the attic floor, the morning light filtering through the dust, and let myself cry. Not the tears of a woman betrayed, but of a mother who finally understood. It was as if the past itself was releasing me, whispering, "You may rest now." When evening came, I walked to the garden, to the place where the roses bloomed wild and free. I buried the bracelet beneath the oldest rose bush, the one Edward planted when we first moved in. Its roots had long outgrown the soil, just as my heart had outgrown its bitterness. As I covered the earth with my hands, I whispered, "For you, my love, for the child we never got to hold, for the years we both lost to pride." The wind stirred softly, brushing my hair back like a gentle hand. And for a fleeting moment, I thought I heard his voice in the rustle of the leaves. "Thank you, Ruth." I closed my eyes, smiled through tears, and let the sound drift away into the evening. My dear, before I go on, if you're still here listening, do subscribe and stay with me, because the days that followed held more secrets than I ever expected, and one final act of love that would change how I remembered Edward forever. For 2 days after Edward's visit, the house felt different, not haunted. No, not quite. More like it was breathing again after holding its breath for 40 years. The air was softer, lighter somehow. Even the ticking of the old clock in the hallway felt gentler, as if time itself had grown tender with me. I moved through the rooms slowly those days, touching things I hadn't noticed in years. The lace runner he bought me from London, the chipped vase he once said reminded him of my laugh. I hadn't thrown them away. Perhaps I never could. Some things stay, even when we pretend they're gone. The letter sat folded neatly on my writing desk. I'd read it a dozen times. Every word, every pause. Each time it struck me differently. The first time it broke me. The second it healed me a little. And by the 12th, it felt like it had never belonged to pain at all, but to truth. And truth, my dear, is never cruel, only late. On the third morning, I woke to a knock at the door. It startled me. Phew! People visit old women who live alone at the edge of the sea. When I opened it, a young man stood there, perhaps 30, with kind eyes and a hat damp from the mist. "Mrs. Langford," he asked gently. I hesitated before nodding. It had been years since anyone called me that. He smiled, relieved. "I'm sorry to disturb you. I work with a solicitor in London. I'm here regarding the estate of Mr. Edward Langford." My heart skipped. "Estate?" He nodded. "He passed 2 nights ago, ma'am. Peacefully, in his sleep. He left something for you." For a moment, I couldn't speak. It was strange. I'd prepared myself for his death when he told me he was sick, and yet the news still felt like a door closing somewhere far away. I invited the young man in. He removed his hat respectfully and handed me a sealed parcel, wrapped in brown paper and tied with a faded blue ribbon. "There's also a letter inside," he said softly. He instructed it be delivered only to you, by hand, and then he left. quietly, as if not to disturb the past that had just entered my home again. I carried the parcel to the parlor table, my hands trembling as I untied the ribbon. Inside was a wooden box, polished but worn, with delicate carvings of roses on the lid. It was locked, but beneath it lay a small silver key taped to another envelope. I unlocked it slowly. Inside, nestled in a lining of velvet, were two things: a small leather-bound diary and a diamond ring, the same diamond ring he once gave the woman he left me for. I froze, unsure if I should feel anger or sorrow. But then I saw a note tucked beneath the ring, written in his familiar slant. I opened it and read, "Ruth, I wanted you to have this, the diamond that once symbolized my betrayal. Let it now symbolize something different. Sell it if you wish. Use it for whatever brings you peace. I cannot undo the pain I caused, but perhaps this can bring you some quiet comfort. As for the diary, it isn't mine. It belonged to your mother. I found it years ago among her things. Inside, you'll find the truth of that letter, the one that tore us apart. I think she meant well, Ruth. She loved you fiercely, even when her ways were cruel. Read it when you're ready. With my final breath, I prayed that you'd know this. You were the only person I ever truly loved. And though I traded your love for diamonds, it was your heart that haunted me till the end. Edward." My fingers shook as I opened the diary. The ink was faded, the pages brittle with time, but her handwriting was unmistakable. My mother's. I began to read. July 12th, 1963. Ruth doesn't know yet. The doctors said the baby may not live. She's so fragile. I can't bear to see her heart break when she's already lost so much to that man. He left her for London, for money, for a woman who can give him nothing but luxury. I will not let him hurt her again. I wrote to him this morning. I told him the baby was gone and that Ruth wanted nothing more to do with him. It's a lie, I know, but perhaps it will save her from years of waiting for a man who no longer deserves her. The words blurred through my tears. I turned another page. August 3rd, 1963. The baby is gone. God forgive me. The lie became truth. And now I don't know who I am anymore. My heart broke for her, for both of us. She had lied to protect me, and in doing so, destroyed the one thing I had left, hope. And Edward, he had believed her. Because lies, when told in love, sound so much like protection. I closed the diary and held it to my chest. For the first time, I didn't hate my mother. I understood her. She had loved me the only way she knew how. Fiercely, imperfectly, desperately, and maybe that's all any of us ever do. That evening, I walked to the cliff behind my house. The sea stretched endlessly before me, silver and calm under the fading light. I held the diamond ring in my hand, its facets catching the last rays of sunset, and then, without hesitation, I threw it into the ocean. It disappeared in a single glimmer, swallowed by the waves. I whispered, "Go back to the glitter you were born from. I no longer need you." I stood there for a long time, feeling the wind against my face, the salt on my lips. I realized then that forgiveness isn't a single act. It's a tide. It comes and goes, softens the edges of grief, and reshapes what remains. And when it recedes, it leaves behind something pure, peace. Later that night, I lit a candle by the window. I placed Edward's letter beside it, along with my mother's diary and the locket, 3 relics of a life once fractured, 3 truths that finally found their place. I whispered into the quiet, "Good night, Edward. Good night, Mother. You can both rest now. And so can I." The flame flickered once, and then steadied. Outside, the sea hummed softly, as if agreeing with me, "My dear, before I continue, If this story has touched your heart even a little, do subscribe and stay with me through the end, because what happens next will show that love, no matter how broken, always finds a way to come home. It's strange how the world feels lighter once you decide to forgive. I thought forgiveness would feel like surrender, a white flag raised in exhaustion. But it isn't. It's strength. Quiet, steady, patient strength. After I threw the diamond into the sea, the house changed again. The silence that used to ache in my bones now hummed softly, like an old friend singing under her breath. Even the floorboards creaked less, as though the walls themselves had exhaled at last. For the first time in decades, I opened the curtains wide and let the morning light in. It poured over the furniture, gilding every scar of time, every wrinkle in the fabric. And I realized, beauty doesn't vanish when it fades. It just becomes gentler. That week, I began tending the garden again. The roses had grown wild during my years of grief, twisting and tangling themselves into brambles. But beneath the thorns, new buds waited patiently, small defiant things still willing to bloom. Every morning, I'd take my tea outside and speak to them softly. Perhaps it was foolish, but I always felt they listened. Edward once said my voice could make even the flowers blush. I smiled at the memory, not with pain this time, but with gratitude. The sea breeze carried his scent sometimes, faint, like old cologne caught in the folds of time. And though I knew it was just the salt in the wind, I found comfort in pretending he was near. One afternoon, as I was pruning the roses, I heard footsteps behind me, firm, careful, but hesitant. I turned, and there stood a young woman, no, older than 25, with chestnut hair and a coat too fine for our little seaside town. "Mrs. Langford," she asked softly. Her voice trembled, just enough to betray the courage it took to come. "Yes," I said, brushing soil from my gloves. "Can I help you?" She hesitated, her eyes glistening. "My name is Clara Whitmore. I believe you knew my father." The air stilled. Something inside me stilled. Her father. And then I saw it. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her jaw, the faint dimple that appeared when she bit her lip. Edward's features, softened by youth and innocence. "You're Edward's daughter," I whispered. She nodded, and in that moment, I felt time bend around us. 2 generations of a story once broken. Standing face to face among the roses, I invited her inside. She looked around the parlor, as if afraid to breathe too loudly, her gaze lingering on the photographs, the lace curtains, the piano Edward once tuned himself. Everything in that room carried the weight of what was and what could have been. She spoke first. "I found your letters," she said, "in Father's chest. After he passed, he kept them all, every single one." My throat tightened. "All of them?" "Yes," she smiled faintly. "Even the ones you never sent?" I blinked. "The ones I never sent?" She nodded and reached into her satchel. "He found them in your old cottage years ago. Said he couldn't bear to throw them away. He kept them with him until the end." I stared at the bundle she placed on the table. Yellowed envelopes tied with twine, my handwriting trembling across each one. I had written them after he left, each one a conversation with the ghost of the man I once loved. Letters I never posted. Words I thought had vanished into silence, and yet here they were, every word preserved, every tear immortalized. I picked one up, unfolded it, and began to read aloud. "My dearest Edward, I don't know if you'll ever read this. Perhaps it's foolish to write to someone who has already chosen another life. But sometimes I think writing is the only way to breathe, without breaking." My voice trembled as I read the next line. I hope she makes you smile, the way I once did. And if she doesn't, I hope you remember that once there was a woman who would have given you her whole heart without asking for anything back. Clara watched me silently, tears glinting in her eyes. When I finished, I folded the letter back into its worn envelope. He kept these all those years, I whispered. He must have read them 100 times. Clara nodded. He did. He told me once, before he died, that if he could change one thing in his life, it would be the way he left you. He said, "You were the only place that ever felt like home." Her words undid me. Tears came quietly, not with despair this time, but with a gentle ache of remembrance. I reached across the table and took her hand. "You look like him," I said softly, "but your kindness, that's yours. Don't let this old story make you sad, my dear. It's done, forgiven." She smiled through her tears. "He wanted me to tell you something if I ever found you." I looked up. "What is it?" She hesitated, then said, "He said to tell you that the rose bushes still bloom on the hill where you first kissed, and that when they do, he feels you there." That night, after she left, I went to the hill myself, the same hill where the world once felt infinite, where young love believed in forever. The roses were in bloom, wild, red, defiant, and for a moment, as the wind brushed past me, I felt it. His presence, light as breath, warm as memory. I whispered, "I know, Edward. I'm here too." The moon rose, the sea shimmered, and I stood there, not as a widow, not as a woman wronged, but as someone who had finally understood the entire story. Because love, you see, never truly ends. It changes its shape, sheds its pain, and waits patiently to be remembered with kindness instead of sorrow. And that, my dear, is what forgiveness feels like when it's finally complete. The evening after Clara left, the house felt alive again. Not loud, not busy, but quietly breathing, as if the walls themselves had exhaled after holding in a sigh for 50 years. I sat by the fire, my hands resting on my lap, and watched the flames sway and dance. There was a calm in me I hadn't felt since girlhood. The ache that had once poisoned my heart had gentled into something warmer, like a scar that no longer hurts but reminds you you've lived. The rain began again, soft and steady, brushing against the windows like fingertips. And in that tender rhythm, I thought about Clara, her eyes so full of questions, her presence a living echo of everything Edward and I had lost. I had believed the story was finished, but that night, fate had one more page to turn. Just after midnight, there was a knock at the door, 3 soft raps, hesitant, deliberate. I almost didn't open it, thinking the wind was playing tricks again, but the sound came once more, clear and real. I wrapped my shawl around me and opened the door. No one was there, only the scent of rain and sea. But on the doorstep lay a small wooden box, carved with a pattern I knew at once, Edward's. Hands had made it decades ago, when he still believed he could craft beauty to make up for the things he couldn't fix. It was engraved with our initials, E and R. My breath caught in my throat. The box was old, the hinges rusted, but inside, something glimmered. A folded piece of parchment tied with a blue ribbon, and a tiny silver key. I carried it inside, my heart beating like it did when I was 20. Set it on the table beside the candle. The wax flickered, as though straining to read it with me. When I untied the ribbon and unfolded the parchment, Edward's handwriting greeted me again. That familiar slant, confident yet trembling at the edges. "My dearest Ruth, if this reaches you, it means Clara has done as I asked. I couldn't rest knowing I'd left you with only half of the truth. You once told me, in one of your unsent letters, that love is a promise, not a possession, that even if we lose each other, the promise must remain. You were right, my darling. You always were. The diamonds I chose over you, they did bring me wealth, but they cost me everything that made me human. Every glittering piece of stone I sold felt like selling another piece of my soul. By the time I realized it, I was too far gone to find my way back. So I built something instead. Something that might one day find its way home to you. Do you remember the chest in our attic? The one you always said was too heavy to move. The key in this box opens it. What's inside belongs to you. It always did. If you find it in your heart to forgive me, know that I forgave myself only when I began to love the memory of you, not with regret, but with gratitude. You were my only home, Ruth. Yours beyond the tides, Edward. I read it twice, 3 times. My fingers trembled against the paper. Then I held up the tiny silver key and knew where I had to go. The attic. That place I'd avoided for years, where old dust and sorrow slept together beneath the beams. I lit a lantern and climbed the creaking steps. Each one groaned like it remembered my weight from decades before. The air was cool, filled with the scent of cedar and thyme. And there it was, the chest, tucked beneath an old quilt, exactly where it had always been. I knelt beside it, the lantern's light trembling on the brass lock. My heart pounded as I slid the key in and turned it. It clicked, soft, final, inevitable. The lid lifted with a sigh. Inside were bundles of papers, wrapped carefully in cloth. Letters, sketches, receipts, the fragments of Edward's life. But beneath them, something else glimmered, a velvet pouch. I opened it. Inside was a small diamond, not the kind that blinds with its brilliance, but one dulled by time, cloudy, uncut, and tied around it was a thin piece of parchment that read, "The only one I never sold." Beneath it was a faded photograph of me standing in this very garden, holding a single rose, smiling at the man behind the camera. Edward's handwriting on the back read, "For the day she forgives me, my heart broke, not from pain, but from a beauty so deep it hurt to hold. I sat there in the dust and light, surrounded by all we'd been, the letters, the love, the regret, all folded into a single truth. He hadn't built monuments or left fortunes. He had built a memory, brick by brick, for me to find when my heart was ready to receive it. And I was ready now." I placed the diamond on the photograph, closed the chest gently, and whispered into the quiet, "I forgive you, Edward." Not because you asked, but because I finally understand. The lantern flame flickered, and for a heartbeat, I could swear I saw his shadow by the window, not watching, but resting, at peace. I went downstairs and opened the window to let the sea breeze in. It filled the room, carrying the scent of salt, roses, and something faintly sweet, like his cologne. I smiled and whispered, "Good night, my love. Sleep now." The waves outside answered softly, curling and retreating, as if the sea itself was breathing his name. My dear, before I continue, if this story has touched your heart even a little, do subscribe and stay with me, because what comes next isn't sorrow. It's the part of life no one tells you about, the quiet beauty of what remains. It's been 12 years since that letter, 12 gentle years of peace I never thought I'd live to see. The house no longer creaks like it used to. The roses outside bloom with a steadiness that reminds me of the sea. Relentless, beautiful, eternal. And well, I've grown smaller somehow. Not in spirit, but in body. The world feels bigger now, not because it changed, but because I finally learned to stop fighting time. My hair, what's left of it, is white as the morning fog. And yet, when I look in the mirror, I still see her, the girl standing by, the peer, the one who once believed that love could outlive regret. Perhaps she was right. I still speak to Edward sometimes. Not in the way the living speak, but in the quiet moments. When the kettle hums or the fire sighs, I tell him about my days, about the neighbor's children who steal apples from the tree, about the gulls that have grown bolder this year. And sometimes, when I'm very still, I swear I hear him chuckle in reply. It was a late spring morning when the letter arrived, handwritten, sealed with pale blue wax. I recognized the handwriting instantly. Clara. My hands trembled as I unfolded the page. Dearest Mrs. Langford, I hope this finds you in good health and warm spirits. It's been far too long, but not a day has passed when I haven't thought of you. I have something to show you, something you should see with your own eyes. May I visit this Sunday? With love, Clara. Of course, I wrote back. And when Sunday came, I baked her favorite, cinnamon loaf with honey glaze, just like I used to when she first came here all those years ago. At precisely 2:00, the sound of wheels crunched along the gravel path. I peeked through the lace curtain and saw her. Taller, wiser, her hair tied neatly beneath a sun hat. But she wasn't alone. Beside her, a little boy held her hand. He couldn't have been more than 5. Bright curls, curious eyes, a small, velvet cap slightly too big for his head. He carried a red rose in his other hand. When they reached the door, I opened it before they could knock. Mrs. Langford, Clara said, her smile trembling. It's so good to see you. And you, my dear, I whispered. Oh, how time has flown. She looked down at the boy. Go on, love. Say hello. He stepped forward, shy but confident in the way children are. Hello, he said. Mummy, says your family. I knelt down, my knees protesting, and smiled. Do you know who I am? He shook his head. I'm Ruth, I said softly. And who might you be, young man? Edward, he replied. The name struck me like a heartbeat. For a moment, the world swayed, not with sadness, but with wonder. We sat in the parlor. Clara poured tea while little Edward explored the room, fascinated by every detail. The old piano, the ticking clock, the collection of seashells on the mantel. He picked one up and held it to his ear. I can hear the ocean, he said. Yes, I smiled. It never really leaves, does it? Clara watched him lovingly. He's always been drawn to the sea, she said. I suppose it runs in the blood. I looked at her, then at him, and in that moment, I understood something quietly miraculous. Life had found its way back, not in the man I lost, but in the generations that followed. Love had returned, wearing a new face, with smaller hands and brighter eyes. After tea, Edward climbed onto the piano stool. Can I play? He asked. I nodded. Of course, my dear. Let's see what you can do. He pressed the keys. Awkwardly, joyfully, the sound uneven but sweet. Then, without knowing, he played the same tune Edward had once composed for me in the summer of '63. I froze. Clara looked at me startled. What's wrong? Nothing, I whispered, tears pooling in my eyes. Nothing at all. How could I explain that the melody I hadn't heard in half a century was now being played by the hands of a child who shared his name? That fate had a way of mending hearts through echoes of music and time. When he finished, he looked up at me proudly. Did you like it? I smiled, wiping a tear before it could fall. Very much, my darling. You played beautifully. He grinned. Mummy says my name means guardian of wealth. I chuckled softly. Yes, but do you know what the greatest treasure in the world is? He shook his head. Love, I whispered. It's the only thing that never loses its shine. Thought for a moment, then nodded seriously, as though sealing a lifelong truth. As evening fell, Clara came to sit beside me by the window. The doctor says your heart's still strong, she said gently. You'll outlive us all, Mrs. Langford. I smiled. Ah, my dear, hearts like mine don't beat to live. They beat to remember. She placed her hand on mine. I wanted you to meet him, to know that his name lives on. Father would have wanted that. I looked out toward the sea, where the horizon shimmered gold. Yes, I whispered. He would have. That night, after they left, I stood in the doorway watching their carriage disappear down the lane. Little Edward turned once and waved, his small hand bright against the twilight, and for a fleeting moment, I saw another Edward beside him. Older, taller, smiling that same gentle smile that had once broken and rebuilt me all at once. The wind carried the scent of roses and sea. I whispered into the dusk, thank you for finding your way home. My dear, before I go on, if you're still with me, listening, do subscribe and stay, because what happens next will take us to my final days in this house, and to the last letter Edward left behind, one that I was never meant to find until I was ready to leave this world too. The sea has grown louder these days, not angry, no, just older, like me. It no longer roars with youth. It hums with memory. Sometimes when I sit by the window and close my eyes, I can tell the weather just by listening to her song. The roses outside bloom later now. The seasons have softened, as if they too have learned patience. And the world beyond my garden, the town, the people, moves faster than ever. But here, time doesn't rush. Here it drifts, like the tide that always finds its way. Home. Clara writes often. Little Edward is 10 now. Curious, brilliant, too clever for his age. He sends me drawings sometimes. Ships, lighthouses, and seashells. Once, he drew me with wings, saying, "So you can visit grandfather in heaven." I keep that one on the mantle. I don't walk as far as I used to. The stairs are too steep now, and my hands tremble when I pour the tea. But my mind, it's still sharp enough to wander. And most nights, it wanders to him, to Edward, to what we lost, and what we found in the end. It was on a night just like this, the rain whispering against the windows, the fire burning low, that I found it. The last letter. It happened by accident. I'd been cleaning the old chest, sorting through papers to leave for Clara when I'm gone. And there, beneath a false panel at the bottom, lay a sealed envelope. Untouched, yellowed with time. It was addressed to me in Edward's handwriting. I stared at it for a long while, my heart beating slow and steady, the way a clock does when it knows its time is almost up. And then, I opened it, my beloved Ruth. If you are reading this, it means you've forgiven me. Or at least, you've learned how to live with the ache I left behind. Either way, thank you. It means I can rest now, truly rest. I once told Clara that regret is like an anchor. It keeps you in one place, long after the storm has passed. But forgiveness, Ruth, forgiveness is the wind that carries us home. I know you never remarried. I know you stayed in that old house by the sea, tending the roses we planted. And though the world may call that loneliness, I see it for what it truly is. Devotion, the kind of love poets try to write and fail. I built my wealth from diamonds, but my fortune was always you. Every breath I took after leaving you was borrowed air. Every sunrise I saw without you was half a sunrise. If heaven has windows, I've watched you every day since the moment I left this world. I've seen your strength, your tears, your laughter, and I've whispered my gratitude with every wave that kissed your shore. So when your time comes, my darling, when you hear the sea calling softly in your sleep, don't be afraid. Follow the sound. I'll be waiting at the edge of the tide, where the water meets the light. Forever yours, Edward. I don't remember how long I sat there. The candle burned low. The rain faded, and still I couldn't move. The words sank into me, warm and cold, all at once. After a while, I pressed the letter to my heart, and for the first time, I didn't cry. There were no tears left to shed, only peace. I whispered, I'm coming, my love, but not yet, not yet. The next morning, I walked, slowly, carefully, to the garden. The roses were still wet from the night's rain, their petals heavy with dew. I carried Edward's final letter and placed it beneath the oldest rose bush, the one that's seen everything, from our first kiss to our final goodbye. As I covered it with soil, I said softly, this time I'm not burying sorrow, I'm planting love. And I swear, the wind stirred in reply, a gentle sigh that brushed my cheek like a kiss. In the evenings now, I sit by the window and speak to him as though he were right there beside me. Sometimes I tell him about Clara's laughter, about little Edward's drawings. Sometimes I tell him how beautiful the sunsets still are. And sometimes I say nothing at all, because silence, I've learned, is just another way of saying, I love you. I know my days are few now. My heart beats slower, but it beats with gratitude for every mistake, for every loss, for every moment that led me here, to this peace, this understanding. And when my time comes, I know I'll go gently, not into darkness, but into light, the same light that reflects off the sea at dawn, the one that's always guided me home. My dear, if you've listened this far, thank you, truly. You've walked with me through youth, heartbreak, forgiveness, and love, the kind that outlives time. If this story touched your heart, even for a moment, do subscribe and stay close, because stories like mine, they don't really end. They just wait for someone kind enough to remember them. And before I say goodnight, tell me, where are you listening from, my dear? It warms this old heart to know where my stories travel. The morning light feels softer today, almost as if it knows something I don't. I woke before dawn, my dear, before even the gulls began their song. The sea was still then, a silver sheet beneath a pale sky, and for a moment I could almost see my reflection in it. Not the woman I am now, but the girl I once was, standing barefoot in the surf, waiting for him. Funny, isn't it? How the past never really leaves us. It simply grows gentler with time. Like a wound that learns to hum instead of ache. The house is so quiet this morning. Even the old clock in the hallway seems to tick softer, as though it too has learned to whisper. The fire has long burned out, but the air still carries the faint scent of smoke and lavender. My Edward always loved lavender. I sit by the window, wrapped in my shawl, watching the horizon bloom gold, and as the first light touches the roses, I feel something stir inside me, a calm I can't quite name. Perhaps it's peace, or perhaps it's goodbye. You know, I used to think forgiveness was a kind of surrender, that to forgive was to let the world win. But I was wrong. Forgiveness isn't surrender. It's strength wearing softness. It's choosing not to let bitterness outlive love. When Edward betrayed me, I thought my heart had turned to stone. But stone sinks, my dear, and love floats. It always finds its way back to the surface, no matter how deep it's buried. Last night, I dreamt of him. He was standing by the sea, dressed in white, younger, the way he looked the day we met. He smiled, not with guilt this time, but with peace. He reached out his hand and said, "It's time, Ruth." And behind him, the sea shimmered. Endless, bright, and calling. But when I tried to take his hand, I couldn't. Something held me back. When I woke, I understood. It isn't time yet. There are still words I must say. Not to him, but to you. The ones who listen, who feel, who carry pieces of stories like mine in their own hearts. My dear, before I continue, if this story has touched your heart even a little, do subscribe and stay with me till the end, because what I'm about to share, it isn't just about me and Edward. It's about every soul that's ever been broken and brave enough to love again. You see, life is a curious thing. It doesn't always give us what we want, but it always gives us what we need to become who we're meant to be. Edward's betrayal didn't ruin me. It refined me. It taught me how to see beauty in imperfection, how to hold pain without letting it poison me, and how to stay open, even when the world tried to close me. I think that's the quiet miracle of growing old, learning that the heart doesn't break, it transforms. The birds are singing now. Their little voices fill the air with something that sounds like joy. I smile, because even after all these years, this world still knows how to be beautiful. Even after everything it's taken, it still gives. The teacup on my table trembles slightly in my hand. The sunlight dances through the window, warm on my skin. And in the reflection of that light, I see them all, Clara, little Edward, and even my own mother, all smiling, all waiting. And suddenly, I'm not afraid. When people ask me if I'd change my life if I could, I say no, because even the worst days brought me to this peace. Every heartbreak shaped me. Every loss carved a space where love could grow deeper. If I hadn't lost him, I might never have found myself. Listen, the clock just struck 7. The morning sun is high now, spilling through the curtains like liquid gold. I can feel warmth in my chest. Not pain, not sorrow, just warmth. It spreads slowly, like sunlight through water. I close my eyes, and I can almost hear Edward's voice again. Soft, steady, waiting. The sea hums with it. The air glows with it. I whisper, "Soon, my love, soon." And the wind outside answers with a sigh. My dear, tell me something. Have you ever forgiven someone who broke your heart? If you have, then you already understand. The secret I've learned, forgiveness isn't about them. It's about freeing yourself, so your soul can breathe again. Because no one deserves to live chained to yesterday, not even a heart as old and fragile as mine. Now before I close my eyes for a little while, let me tell you this. If life ever hurts you, don't let it harden you. Let it teach you. Let it turn you softer, wiser, kinder. Because the world doesn't need more cold hearts. It needs people who've been broken and still choose to love. The light is brighter now, almost blinding, but it's beautiful. I think I'll rest my eyes for a moment, just here by the window. The sea will sing me to sleep. And when I wake, perhaps I'll be walking by the shore again, barefoot, hand in hand, with the man who once traded my love for diamonds, but finally found his soul again in forgiveness. When I was a girl, I used to think that death was an ending, a closing of the door, a silence that swallowed the world. But now that I stand so close to it, I see that I was wrong. It isn't an ending, my dear. It's a return. To light, to memory, to love that never truly left. I remember that morning as if it were painted in gold. The sea was calm, the air smelled of roses and salt, and the light, oh the light, it poured into the house like a warm embrace. I sat by the window, holding my shawl, the same one Edward once bought for me from a market in Florence, and then, somewhere between one breath and the next, the world grew quiet. Not silent, no, just quiet, like a song that knows it's reached its final note. I felt my heart beat slow, steady, tender. The sunlight touched my face one last time, and in that moment, I heard him, his voice, deep, familiar, filled with the warmth of every summer we ever shared. It's time, Ruth. This time, when I reached for his hand, nothing held me back. The world around me faded. The walls, the window, the sound of the sea, all dissolved into light, and there he was, my Edward, smiling, waiting, just as he promised. He looked younger, his eyes the same shade of blue as the morning sky. He took my hand gently, as though afraid I might vanish if he held on too tightly. I told you, he said softly. The sea would bring you back to me. I laughed, a sound I hadn't made in years. Oh, Edward, I whispered. You foolish man, you could have just stayed. He smiled, that same boyish grin I once fell for. I had to lose everything, he said, to learn what truly mattered. And I understood, because forgiveness had already shown me the same truth. As we walked along the shore, yes, barefoot, just like the first time, the world glowed around us. The water shimmered, gold and silver, and the wind carried laughter that wasn't just ours, but everyone's. All the souls who had ever loved and lost and found their way home. There was no pain here, no bitterness, no regret, only the soft rhythm of waves and the knowledge that love never really dies. Sometimes, my dear, I still speak to you. Yes, you who are listening. Perhaps when you hear the sea at night, that's me whispering through the tide. Or when you see an old house with roses by the window, that's my memory brushing past, smiling at you. Because stories like mine aren't meant to end. They ripple through time, finding hearts that need them. And maybe, just maybe, you needed this one tonight. I forgave Edward long before I saw him again. But now, standing beside him in this endless light, I realized something even deeper. That I also forgave myself for staying, for loving too much, for breaking and still choosing to heal. And in that forgiveness, I found peace. I look back once. The house is still there, small and quiet beneath the cliffs. The roses blooming brighter than ever. A young woman walks by the shore, Clara, older now, wiser. She's holding her son's hand, pointing toward the sea. I hear her say, "That's where your great-grandmother found her forever." The boy looks out at the horizon and waves, as if he can see me. And maybe he can, because love, true love, doesn't vanish with the years. It lingers in the wind, the water, the laughter of children who never met us, but somehow know us. If you're still here, my dear, thank you for walking with me through every chapter of my heart. Before I fade into the quiet, let me leave you with this. No matter who you are, or what you've lost, or how deep your scars run, remember that forgiveness is not weakness, it's freedom. It's how the soul breathes again. And one day, when your heart is ready, you'll find that every wound was just a doorway, leading you home. The light grows brighter now, but it doesn't blind me. It feels like sunrise. And Edward's hand is warm in mine. The sea hums its eternal lullaby. The world exhales, and we walk into the horizon, together at last. If you stayed with me till the end, my dear, thank you. Tell me the time and country you're watching from in the comments. It warms this old heart to know where my stories travel. The sea fades. The screen lingers on the window, glowing with morning light. Then darkness. Just the sound of waves and one last whisper. He traded my love for diamonds. But I traded my pain for peace.